It began with the silence, not the kind that comforts a weary soul, nor the hush that settles over a town after a long day's ride, but the kind of silence that hangs too heavy, too still, as if the land itself was holding its breath. The desert had stopped breathing that evening, and no one noticed, no one but her. They said she betrayed the ranch, no trial, no last words, just a sack over her head, tied hands, a hard shove into the dirt, then the shovel, again and again and again, until the sky was gone and all she could hear was her heartbeat crashing against her ribs, until the earth pressed in so close it felt like it might pull her into the marrow of the world. Her name had been Loretta May Callahan, 26 years old, second daughter to the owner of Dry Creek Ranch, and she hadn't betrayed anyone. The air in her lungs turned to fire with every gasp. Dirt filled her mouth, her ears. Her mind screamed, but her body gave in. The last thing she remembered was her fingernails clawing at the coffin lid, the scratch of old wood against bone. Then darkness folded her into its arms. Far above her the desert sighed. Wind stirred the sand. Night fell, and a man came riding through. He had no name anyone cared to remember. Some called him a drifter. Others said he was a bounty hunter once, until he stopped collecting gold for killing and started searching for something else, or someone. His face was weathered, shadowed by the wide brim of a dust-worn hat. His boots were cracked. His eyes, when they looked out from under that hat, held the cold calm of a man who'd already lost everything worth speaking of. His horse trotted slow. He wasn't in a hurry. People like him never were. Not anymore. That night he stopped beneath a dying tree near an outcrop of rock. Just a place to stretch his legs, drink from the canteen, and stare up at the stars. But as he dismounted and dropped a knee to the earth, his hand brushed the ground and froze. A sound. Faint. So faint he almost thought it was the wind. But the desert didn't lie. Not to him, not tonight. It came again. A tap. Then two. Then stillness. Then the faintest tremble like fingers pressed against death. He lowered his ear to the dirt, waited. Another knock. He leapt to his feet.
He dug with his hands first, then with a knife, then with a broken branch. The ground was cruel. It fought him every inch, but he fought harder. Hours passed. Sweat ran cold down his spine, nails split, blood mixed with dust. Then, wood. He clawed at it like a beast, tearing it apart until fingers reached back up from the grave. They weren't moving. He lifted her out gently, as if cradling something holy. She was limp, soaked in earth, lashes thick with mud. But when he pressed his ear to her chest, a thud. Weak. But there. He wrapped her in his coat, carried her to the fire, sat beside her all night, feeding the flames, whispering things only the stars heard. In the morning, she opened her eyes. Clouded, scared, her lips parted. "Who am I?" He didn't answer. Not yet. He just gave her water, let her drink, let her breathe. And in his mind, something cracked open. A wound he hadn't touched in years. A memory of a girl once lost in the dark, a scream that came too late, a grave he couldn't stop from being filled. But this time, he heard the knock. And he answered.
The second day dawned cold and dry, sun rising over the hills like a silent witness. The wind had stilled, but the memory of the night remained thick in the air. She stirred slowly, limbs stiff from trauma and cold, eyes fluttering open with the fragile clarity of someone just born. The drifter sat nearby, sharpening his blade with slow, deliberate strokes, as if the rhythm was all that kept the day in order. She watched him. Her eyes were the pale color of washed linen, wide and unsure. She hadn't spoken since the question, hadn't asked her name again. Maybe she was afraid of the answer. Maybe she knew enough already. That she'd been buried. That she shouldn't be alive. The fire crackled low. He poured water into a tin cup and tossed it to her. "You ain't from nowhere nearby," he said, his voice like gravel dragged through rain. Hands too clean for the desert, skin too fair. She took the cup, slipped slowly. "I don't remember," she whispered. He nodded, not pressing. He'd seen too many broken things in his time to force them back into shape. Things find their own way. People too. They rode by midday. She couldn't walk far, so he let her ride the horse while he led it, one hand firm on the reins, the other resting near his revolver. They moved through canyon paths and sage-brush trails, past ghost towns and rusted fences. Everywhere she looked, she half expected something to jog her memory, a sign, a name, a ridge of hills. But the land gave nothing back. That night they camped under a rock shelf. The stars came out slow, cautious, as if unsure whether to trust what they saw. She sat by the fire, arms wrapped around her knees. "Why did you help me?" He looked at her a long time. "Because I couldn't help the last one." He didn't say more, didn't have to. Pain had its own language, and she spoke it too well to need translation. Later, as the wind picked up, he gave her his blanket. She protested, weakly, but he shook his head. He settled on a bedroll nearby, back turned, hand resting on his gun, as sleep crept in like a wary fox. But she didn't sleep. She watched the shadows dance across the cave wall. Something inside her shifted like a tide turning. She didn't know who she was yet, but she knew this man had pulled her from death, and she owed him something. The third day brought voices. They were in a small trading post, 2 cabins and a water trough by a dusty road. The drifter was trading meat for supplies when a grizzled man pointed at her, eyes narrowing. "Ain't that Callahan's girl from Dry Creek?" She froze. The drifter stepped forward, slow and dangerous. "You sure about that?" The man spat. "Saw her ride with those land thieves last winter. Whole town saying she sold the ranch out, got her daddy killed." Her legs gave out beneath her. Callahan, Dry Creek, ranch. The words tumbled like stones in her chest. The drifter pulled her up and walked her out without another word. But she saw it, the way his jaw clenched, the shadows rising behind his eyes. He knew something now, something about her, maybe too much. Back at camp, she sat in the dark, staring at the ground. "Is it true?" she asked, voice barely audible. He didn't answer, because he didn't know. Not yet. But he was going to find out.
The sun hadn't risen yet when they saddled up and left the broken barn behind. Shadows stretched long across the desert floor, cast by a swollen red moon still clinging to the night sky. Clara rode behind the drifter, her arms wrapped loosely around his waist. The rhythm of the horse's gait lulled her into silence, but her thoughts were spinning like a dust devil. "Where are we going?" she finally asked. The drifter didn't look back. "Somewhere you won't be buried again." They rode east, away from the ranch, away from the people who'd called her traitor. Clara's eyes, once filled with tears and dust, began to clear. Still, the memory of the coffin walls and dirt pressing down on her chest returned with every creak of the saddle. By mid-morning, they came upon a narrow canyon carved by time and wind. He led her into its shade and stopped beside a dry creek bed. "This place got ears," he said. "We need to rest and talk before they find our trail." Clara slid off the horse. Her legs buckled, but he caught her. It was the first time the eyes truly met in daylight. His were gray, rimmed with years of silence and danger. Hers were bloodshot, but unyielding. "You saved me," she said. "You weren't supposed to be in that grave." She hesitated, then sat on a rock warmed by the sun. "They think I sold them out. The ranch. Eli's men raided it the same night I was seen talking to someone in the saloon. They put it together too quick." "Who were you talking to?" Clara looked down. "My brother. I hadn't seen him in years. He rides with Eli now. He didn't tell me what they planned. I swear it. I wouldn't." The drifter watched her closely. "What's your brother's name?" "Jedediah Rayburn." Something in his face shifted. "Jed's alive." Clara's head snapped up. "You knew him?" "I rode with him, years back, before he joined Eli's butchers." She stood up, alarmed. "You're one of them?" "No," he said firmly. "I left when they turned cruel. Jed stayed. I tried to stop him." Clara stepped closer. "Then you know he ain't evil, just twisted by war like the rest of us." Before he could answer, a sound echoed through the canyon, a sharp whistle, followed by silence. The drifter's hand went to his revolver. "They're here." He grabbed her wrist and pulled her deeper into the canyon. They scrambled over rocks and ducked behind boulders slick with lichen. From above, the sound of hoofbeats drew near. Shadows passed along the canyon rim. 5 riders. One's got a silver saddle. That's Brixton, Eli's second. Clara's breath caught. "They'll kill you for helping me." "Not if I kill them first." She touched his arm. "You can't take them all." "I don't have to. Just enough to make the others turn." The drifter pulled a battered rifle from the horse's bedroll. He checked the chamber. 2 bullets. "That ain't enough." He looked at her, eyes like storm clouds. "It'll have to be." The moment broke as a rock shifted nearby. One of the riders had dropped into the canyon. The drifter motioned for Clara to run deeper into the crevice while he took cover. Clara ran, breath ragged, until she found a cave mouth half covered by brush. She ducked inside, heart pounding. From somewhere behind her, the crack of gunfire rang out. Once, then again. Silence followed, then footsteps. She held her breath, fists clenched. The shadow that entered was tall, lean, and limping. It was the drifter. 2 dial, he grunted. 3 to go. Blood soaked his left shoulder. She rushed to him. "You're hurt." He waved it off. "A scratch. We need to ride. Now." But it was too late. A voice rang out from the canyon's mouth. Well, hell, look what the tide spit out.
Brixton. He sauntered into view, long rifle resting on his hip, silver trim on his coat catching the dying moonlight. Behind him, 2 men flanked the entrance. Clara stepped in front of the drifter, arms out. "You already buried me once. You want to do it again?" Brixton smirked. "Don't tempt me, darlin'. Boss says bring you back alive. Didn't say nothing about the pretty face next to you." The drifter raised his weapon. Brixton raised his. And then a whistle. Sharp, clear, cutting through the canyon air. All eyes turned. From behind Brixton, a figure emerged on horseback, cloaked in a buffalo hide coat, rifle across his back. Jedediah Rayburn. His voice was hoarse. "Drop it, Brixton." Brixton spun. "You ridin' with her now?" Jed's face was unreadable. "She's my sister." The standoff stretched like a wire about to snap. Clara whispered, "Jed." His eyes flicked to her. "You all right?" "No thanks to them." Brixton cursed. "Boss won't like this, Jed." Jed's voice dropped. "Then he can ride out here and say it to me." Brixton hesitated. Then, seeing the storm brewing behind Jed's stare, he lowered his rifle. "Ain't worth it." He spat in the dust. "Come on, boys. This fight's gone sour." The other 2 men backed off. One gave Clara a long, cold look before turning his horse. When they were gone, Jed dismounted. For a long moment no one spoke. Then Clara walked to her brother. He looked older, wearier, but something in his eyes had softened. "I didn't betray the ranch." He nodded. "I know. I never believed you did." "Then why?" Jed glanced at the drifter. "Because someone needed to draw Eli out, and he trusts Brixton more than he should. You were the bait." The drifter stiffened. "You used her?" Jed met his gaze. "I didn't know they'd bury her. I thought they'd scare her, maybe run her off. I never thought they'd dig a grave." Clara turned away, jaw tight. Jed stepped closer. "Let me make it right." She didn't answer. Instead, she looked to the drifter. He said nothing, but his nod was enough. She turned back to her brother. "Then start by helping us burn the ranch to the ground." The drifter's voice was cold steel. "Eli has to answer for what he did." Jed's jaw clenched. "Then let's ride." Outside, the blood moon hung low, casting a red glow over the desert, and 3 riders vanished into the night. It began with fire. That was what he remembered most. Not the screams, not the horse hooves thundering into the rally, but the fire that swallowed the prairie grass like it had a grudge to settle. Emmett stood at the edge of the abandoned mining camp, Colt loaded, eyes scanning the ridge above. The night before had been endless. He and Clara had ridden till the moon gave up, and dawn turned the sky the color of old bruises. Now the abandoned mining shacks loomed like ghosts with charred bones. The place was perfect for a trap, and he knew it. Clara sat by the remains of a fire he'd made, her shawl pulled tight around her shoulders. Her eyes were distant, red-rimmed, but not from tears. That girl had bled everything out days ago. What lived now in her chest was something colder than grief, something heavier.
She'd said little since their escape, but the silence between them was louder than any confession. "Why here?" she asked, finally, her voice hoarse. "They think like hunters. We need to think like prey that bites," Emmett said. "They'll track us, but they don't know this place." Clara's jaw twitched. "I do." He turned to her slowly. "You been here before?" She nodded. "This is where they killed my brother." The wind kicked up, scattering ash across the stones. Emmett sat across from her. He watched her closely, but not like a man watching a woman, more like a man reading a storm on the horizon. "So they said he stole cattle." "He didn't. It was a setup. They shot him anyway. My father begged on his knees. They laughed." Emmett leaned forward. "Your father, he's still alive?" She shook her head. "No. A month later, he fell from the canyon ledge. They said it was the wind, the same wind we're breathing now." Emmett felt something tighten in his gut. All this talk of betrayal, of fathers, of ghosts, it was stirring something old in him, something he'd buried beneath whiskey and the long miles. "So you got close to the foreman, made them think you were loyal?" She met his eyes, unflinching. "Yes, I brought them whiskey, played dumb, even smiled. I did what I had to. But the day I found that ledger, names, bribes, shipments, they caught me. Buried you alive for it." She nodded. "And I screamed till my throat bled, thought maybe it was better I died with the truth still under my nails." Emmett reached into his satchel and pulled out the folded map, the one he'd taken from the saddlebags back in the ravine. "Then it's not just you they want. It's what you know, what you might have taken." She looked at the map, expression shifting. "That's not just a map. That's the trail they use to move the stolen stock into Mexico. That's why they can't let me live." Emmett cursed under his breath. "And we best move at night, burn the map, leave no trail." "No," said Clara suddenly, fiercely. "We keep it. It's proof, maybe the only thing that can clear my name and my brother's." He stared at her for a moment, then gave the faintest nod. That night they didn't light a fire. The cold pressed in from all sides. Somewhere on the ridge coyotes howled, and farther still riders moved under the stars, slow, methodical, hunting. Near midnight, Clara stirred in her sleep. Emmett was still awake, back against the stone wall of the shack, Colt in hand. She whispered in the dark, "Emmett." "Yeah." "You ever loved someone?" The question hit like a sucker punch. He didn't answer right away. "Once," he said finally. "She wore green ribbons, smelled like rain. She died in childbirth. I never held the baby. Couldn't bring myself to." Clara didn't speak for a long time. Then she said, "If we make it out of this, I want to plant roses, somewhere with sun." Emmett looked at her, and for a moment he didn't see the dirt-streaked fugitive for the girl buried beneath betrayal. He saw a woman with roots, a woman trying to grow something out of scorched earth. Then came the whistle, soft, distant, but clear. Riders. Emmett was on his feet in an instant, gun drawn. Clara crouched beside him, heart hammering. "How many?" she asked. He peeked through the slats. 3, maybe 4. Coming slow. "We can't outrun 'em."
No, Emmett said, but we can bleed 'em enough they remember us. He passed her a pistol. Ever shoot one of these? She gave a ghost of a smile. Only when I meant it. They held their breath. The sound of hooves got closer. A shadow passed near the broken window. Then a voice called out, drawled and cruel. "Clara, girl, I know you're in there. We dug your grave once. Don't think we won't do it proper this time." She flinched. Emmett's voice was low. "When I shoot, run for the creek bed. Keep low. You hear me?" Clara grabbed his sleeve. "Don't die here. Not for me." He looked at her like it was the first time. "Maybe it's the only place I live right." Then he kicked the door open and fired.
The sun cracked the ridge like a blade splitting the sky, and the desert wind carried the scent of blood and gunpowder. It was dawn when Silas rode alone into the burned remains of Lock Ridge Ranch, dust swirling around him like ghosts called to witness what was about to unfold. Behind him, strapped across his horse, was the lifeless body of Dawson Kane, bound and bloodied, justice etched across his hollow face. Maeve stood on the ridge, wrapped in a faded blanket, watching. Her body still bore bruises and healing wounds, but her eyes, those fierce storm-gray eyes, were clear now, no longer shadowed by fear. Silas had told her to stay in the hills, to let him handle what needed doing, but she'd lived with silence too long. This reckoning belonged to her, too. The townsfolk had gathered. Some recognized the man dangling from Silas's saddle. Others looked away, shame thick in the morning air. But Silas didn't stop to preach. He untied the rope, let Dawson's corpse thud into the dirt, and turned to the men who'd followed Kane's orders. "Where's Ellis?" Silas growled. His voice was low, steady, but the fire behind his eyes sent men stepping back. Ellis Lockridge stepped out from the saloon's shade, still wearing that white hat stained at the brim, symbol of a legacy built on cruelty. "You got something to say, Drifter?" he asked, calm and smug. Silas reached into his coat and threw Maeve's wedding ring into the dust at Ellis's feet. "She was your sister-in-law, and you buried her alive over a lie." Ellis's smirk faltered. Behind him, the other shifted uneasily. "She conspired to kill my brother," Ellis snapped. "No," Maeve's voice rang out, firm as iron. She stepped forward, the blanket falling from her shoulders. The crowd parted. "I tried to stop Dawson. Your brother was innocent, and Dawson knew it. You didn't bury me because you believed I was guilty. You buried me because I was inconvenient." Ellis turned pale. "You're dead." "I was," she said softly. "I left you there. I heard the dirt fall. I screamed until my voice was gone. And I forgave you for it, until you did it again to others." Whispers surged through the crowd. Maeve pulled back her sleeve, revealing the ugly scar along her arm, the mark of clawing against a wooden coffin lid. It was proof no one could unsee. Silas turned to the townsfolk. "How many of you knew what they did? How many stood by while innocent blood was spilled?" A woman cried. A man dropped his head. The silence was answer enough. Ellis reached for his pistol, but Silas was faster. A single shot rang out. Ellis crumpled into the dirt, his white hat rolling from his head like a final confession. The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't run. They just watched, as if absolution required their eyes this time. Maeve knelt beside her sister-in-law's grave, Sarah, killed by Dawson after she'd learned the truth. She placed a flower, plucked from the riverbank where Silas had first taken her after digging her out. They buried Dawson beside the cattle pens, no marker, no prayer. That evening, with the sun casting long shadows over the town, Silas saddled the horses. Maeve walked beside him, quiet but not uncertain. "Where we headed?" she asked. "North," he said. "Montana, maybe. Heard the winters are brutal, but the people don't ask too many questions." She gave a small smile. "Sounds like paradise." He helped her up, swung onto his own horse, and they rode. Not fast, not running, just away. Past the fences and gallows and gallops of a land that had stolen too much. The wind tugged at Maeve's hair, and Silas reached over, fingers brushing hers gently. She didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned into it, into him. Miles behind them, Lockridge faded into the haze. No one would remember the name in a generation, but the story, the one of a girl buried alive and the drifter who heard her knock, that would live longer than tombstones. Because some reckonings come in blood, but the ones worth remembering come in love.